All right, and we're talking about Israel's famed Iron Dome defense system, which has faced its biggest test last evening as Iran fired hundreds of missiles and rockets of varying capability. The missile defense system actually comprises several layers, with the Iron Dome being the last line of defense. And in fact, before missiles actually encounter the Iron Dome, they're already just 70 kilometers from the targets and possibly within 10 kilometers from the ground. But Israel has other missile defense systems as well that intercept munitions long before they enter the range of the Iron Dome. Two of these that are likely to have been used yesterday are the David Sling and the Arrow defense system. Now, David Sling takes out incoming missiles at a range of 300 kilometers and up to an altitude of up to 15 kilometers. And the most important is the Arrow missile defense system as well. It's specifically geared towards taking out incoming ballistic missiles. Now, these missiles are fired into a very high altitude and from a long range. They descend at great speed at their targets, making stopping them very, very difficult. These ballistic missiles are generally also of the type that can be used to carry nuclear warheads as well, which makes them, or stopping them really, very, very critical. Now, Israel's Arrow system can intercept long-range ballistic missiles as far as 100 kilometers off the ground, and counter missiles have a range of up to 2,500 kilometers. Now, this is all as per the publicly available information as far as these missile defense systems are concerned. Let's also take a look at how the missile defense system works. It's a relatively simple principle with very, very complex technology behind it. After an enemy fires a rocket, once it's within range, Israel's radars detect and track it. They relay this data to a control system which estimates the impact point based on the trajectory and the telemetry that is available. It uses this precise data to fire a counter rocket, which then intercepts the aggressor rocket. All this is done within a time frame of minutes, perhaps even seconds. The system is smart enough to assess threats and ignores projectiles that it calculates will land in uninhabited areas. That's as far as how this entire system is concerned as well. And therefore, in fact, the launcher finally, of course, firing an interceptor missile. Now, the Iron Dome system was set up against Iran that operates missiles and, in fact, have a range varying between 200 kilometers to 2,000 kilometers. Given that the land border of Iran is at least 1,700 kilometers from Israel, it's likely that the Iranian regime rolled out its longer range weaponry. Amongst these, the Shahab 3 and the Sejil medium-range ballistic missile systems are perhaps capable of being fired from Iran's soil and reaching targets in Israel. It's unclear whether these were indeed the very missiles that were used from Iran. Iran has also gained an expertise in making unmanned drones, but they've not been mentioned in the context of this latest broadside so far. Now, Israel has vowed retaliation. It says that it has plans ready and will effect them at the time and place of their choosing. Now, this is, of course, tremendous speculation about what Israel may target. Now, Iran has a number of energy assets and facilities, and its nuclear sites in particular have been on Israeli and American radars for years. There are nuclear research facilities or reactors near Tehran as well as Isfahan. There are uranium processing facilities in Isfahan and Ardakan. Then there are uranium mines in Saghand and heavy and light water facility places such as Ara and Bulsher. Now, more importantly, there are said to be uranium enrichment facilities in Natanz as well. This is as far as the information that is publicly available. Finally, with the entire region that is a tinderbox, the larger question is that with Israel potentially fighting four enemies, that is Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and the Iranian military, it has very, very powerful ally in the vicinity. As per inputs, the US has naval assets positioned close to Israel and at Iran's jugular. Now, this is the USS Harry Truman aircraft carrier and its carrier strike group that are said to be positioned in the Mediterranean Sea of Israel's coast. On the other side, the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group is positioned in the Gulf of Oman. In the Red Sea as well, the US has naval assets deployed, and because of almost 3 decades of fighting wars in the region, there are estimated to be as many as 43,000 American troops in this very region. Let's quickly take this across now to our guest. Now joining us with us is Kobi Shoshani, who's a Consul General of Israel to the Midwest India region. Thank you so much, Mr. Shoshani, for joining us. Now, what we're looking at in terms of the Iron Dome, in terms of the defense systems, now this is very complicated technology, but it has once again proved its worth because clearly it was able to protect life and property in Israel as you witnessed hundreds of rockets coming in from the Iranian side.
First of all, good evening. Today is the Israeli or the Jewish New Year. Then for us, it's a holiday, very important holiday. According to the Jewish tradition, this is the day that the God created the universe. And it's very, very important day for us this night. Yes, I have to tell you something which is probably will not surprise you. I'm very proud to be an Israeli. I'm very proud to be an Israeli, not because I'm a diplomat, because of what we saw, and your description make it in a very nice way, this iron shield and the arrow and all this David ring. All this technology is a unique technology that we built for the citizen of Israel. We built together with other nations, and today we are leading the world with them. Definitely it will give us a confidence, definitely it's going to give us a power, and definitely the enemies around us, and you mentioned Iran, and along with their proxies that they built in the recent years, made since October 7th, brutal attack against the state of Israel. Then I'm proud to be an Israeli, that first of all, we have the ability to defend ourselves. And the second thing, I'm very proud that we can actually manage all these attacks from all over, and it's not an easy task, if you understand what I mean.
But Mr. Shoshani, let me ask you a simple question. At the end of the day, there are many who are saying that, when it comes to the statement that we saw coming of Mr. Netanyahu appealing to the people, it appears that the target that Israel has set for itself is regime change in Iran and nothing short of it.
I've heard several times in Hebrew and English, Prime Minister Netanyahu, we get some meeting along with the Minister of Foreign Affairs as well. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu make it in a very clear voice. Retaliation going to be made. It's not going to be made because of the retaliation. It's going to be made because if you are not going to react today, the next time going to be worse. In my point of view, it's extremely important. It's not only the Prime Minister thought, or the Prime Minister or the cabinet, not only the commander of the army, it's also the public opinion. People understand the urge to act against Iran, and it's very, very important.
But sir, many are also wondering why opening up multiple fronts at the same time. There's already, of course, fighting that was on in Gaza for almost a year now. Of course, we've seen what's been happening on the Lebanon front with Hezbollah in the past. But now, of course, with this kind of attack taking place, the Houthis in Yemen and, of course, Nasrallah there in Iran, the larger question that many are asking is that why open up multiple fronts? Because the possibility of an escalation in the fighting, escalation in the violence, if there are so many fronts open at the same time, certainly, of course, cannot augur well.
It's a very good question. First of all, we didn't start the war, not in October 7th and not afterwards. Iran sent to us these ballistic missiles that you are well described in your introduction. Then that's, first of all, the fact. The second thing, that the Iranians, along with their proxies, and we have to understand what is going on. In Gaza, almost there is no military capability of Hamas because of our operation. It takes more than we thought, because all the tunnels underground in Gaza that they built for 15 years or more than that was almost destroyed, and they don't have capabilities. In Lebanon, in the last 4 weeks, we saw the result, and the result was extraordinary in our point. All the leadership of Hezbollah, the proxies of Iran, disappeared. It's amazing, and I don't want to add to this military and the procedure that we made it. And right. Yemen, it's a challenge, and I think that they've heard the noises of the blast in the last 2 weeks and even before. And now this is the source of the problem, Iran.
Right. Mr. Shoshani, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us and explaining to us from your perspective what we can expect in coming days, and certainly, of course, the logic that is being given out by the government of Israel. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Let me also open this up and take it across to our other guests. We have Brigadier General Yosef Kupawasa, who's a former head of Military Intelligence Research Division. We also have Scott Lucas, who's a professor of international politics at the University College Dublin. Let me begin with you, Brigadier General Yosef Kupawasa. What are we looking at potentially in terms of Israel's retaliation? Of course, it said that it will retaliate at a time and a place of its choosing, but given the fact that Israel's fairly far, about over 1,500 kilometers away physically from Iran, we're looking at a potential airstrike. What could be the potential targets? What could we be potentially looking at in coming days?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And secondly, coming back to your question, it's hard to say exactly what's going to happen because there's a variety of potential targets that Israel may try to hit. What Israel has done in the recent weeks is to prove that this distance between Israel and Iran is not an obstacle for carrying out an attack against Iran, because we have just, for the second time, attacked targets in Yemen, the Houthis in Yemen, and this is farther than Iran from Israel. It's 1,800 kilometers, whereas Iran is only somewhere between 1,300 and 1,700 kilometers away from Israel. So it's not something that we cannot do, and we have been preparing ourselves to this eventuality for a long time, not only building the capability to intercept the incoming Iranian missiles, but also building the capability to hit targets in Iran. That's why we equipped ourselves with a lot of F-35 airplanes, and that's why we are practicing this eventuality again and again by ourselves and together with our American friends, so that we shall be able to do whatever is necessary. The most plausible targets that we are looking at is the Iranian nuclear program. You described extremely well how this is deployed and located all around Iran. But we have to remember that the Iranians now are in a position where they are very close to having enough fissile material, or so enough highly enriched uranium to produce fissile material for a considerable arsenal of nuclear weapons within a very short period of time.
Right.
And what we've seen yesterday was how dangerous Iran is without nuclear weapons. Just imagine how dangerous Iran is going to be with nuclear weapons. That's why I think that the
well, the world is watching very closely, and we certainly hope there is no escalation on the nuclear front. But Scott Lucas, that's a very real and distinct possibility, and therefore the targets could possibly be, in fact, the nuclear facilities. But beyond that, what is the kind, at a time when there is a potential fighting, on the conventional lines that is expected to take place in Lebanon. On the other hand, we're looking at airstrikes that are the possibility in Iran. How are we going to see all of this play out? Because, with the strong backing of the United States, is Israel really in a position to have a long-drawn conflict?
Well, I think the first area of concern is not a direct Israel-Iran conflict. The first area of concern is not a direct Israel-Iran conflict. I need to explain that. First of all, one of the reasons why Israel and its allies were so effective in preventing civilian casualties, and most of the missiles being fired on military positions, was because Iran notified Arab countries in advance that the attack was coming. Those Arab countries probably notified the United States, who notified Israel. Why would Iran do that? Iran did that because it wanted to show to its own people, after Hezbollah, Hamas, Iranian figures had been assassinated by Israel, that Iran was still tough. It was still there to fight. But at the same time, the Iranian regime didn't want to get into a direct confrontation with Israel. They know they're outgunned by the Israelis. So they have what is called a demonstration strike. It still is a very scary thing for Israelis to face, but it was largely for show rather than to cause massive damage. The second reason why I think we're not talking about an Iran-Israel confrontation is that the biggest winner last night from the Iranian attacks was the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What he has now is the space to continue an open-ended war in Gaza, even as the death toll there nears 42,000 in almost a year, and he has the space to pursue the operations in Lebanon with the beginnings of a ground invasion, which occurred only yesterday. The reason why Netanyahu has been saved by the Iranians, only a month ago, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis that were protesting because they wanted a priority on the return of Israel's hostages who have been held by Hamas for almost a year. They wanted that as a priority rather than the destruction of Hamas.
Right.
Netanyahu was under a great deal of pressure. So the response, supported by the military, who for their own reasons wanted a second front.
Well, there is certainly that view that Iran's action has perhaps facilitated what Netanyahu would have wanted and Israel would have wanted to that extent. Certainly, of course, those are the views that are being expressed by many. Scott Lucas as well as Brigadier General Yosef Kupawasa, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us, because as Israel and Iran are locked in conflict, Russia has called for restraint and says the situation is alarming. Russia has also said the death of civilians is condemnable. Here's what the spokesperson to Russian President Vladimir Putin had to say.
Эта ситуация развивается по наиболее тревожному сценарию. Мы призываем все стороны к сдержанности на фоне того, что происходит. И, конечно же, мы осуждаем любые действия, которые ведут к гибели гражданского населения.
All right, that was President Putin's spokesperson, in fact, talking about what really is the expectation as far as Russia is concerned. And of course, Russia appealing for peace at this moment is very, very significant, saying that this is, in fact, causing a huge amount of alarm. We're going to slip into a quick break. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned.